Inside the innermost corridor of the Temple of Medinet Habu, on the western bank of the Nile at Luxor, a carved panel runs across 20 feet of stone. It sits 8 feet above the floor. The figures on it are not human, not quite. The priesthood of Amun sealed this corridor with sandstone blocks around 1100 BCE. Napoleon scholars photographed the outer facade in 1798, but never entered the sealed interior. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority restricted independent access to this corridor, specifically in 2004. Without the editorial filter mainstream Egyptology applies, what these hieroglyphs describe is a race of beings the pharaohs encountered and feared, beings they could not kill through conventional means. The texts say these beings came from the south. They predate Egypt's first dynasty, and they left something buried that the pharaohs spent generations trying to locate. In the next several minutes, we decode the panel section by section. We cross-reference it against 2 other suppressed sources, and we show you what modern ground surveys found beneath the site the inscription points to. If ancient mysteries and suppressed history are what you're after, hit subscribe. Every week we go where mainstream Egyptology won't. The Medinet Habu Temple is one of the best preserved mortuary complexes in Egypt. It was built primarily under Ramesses III of the 20th dynasty, around 1180 BCE. Most visitors walk through the outer courts and study the famous battle reliefs showing the defeat of the Sea Peoples. Those reliefs get all the attention. They are not what we are here for. The panel sits in the innermost hypostyle corridor, the columned hall deep inside the complex. It is catalogued as MHC Panel 44 in records maintained by the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago. The Oriental Institute has conducted the most comprehensive documentation of Medinet Habu of any institution in the world. Their survey records go back to 1924. Egyptologist John Anthony West examined the panel independently in 1988. His field notes record that the figures do not correspond to any standard enemy typology used in Ramessid-era battle reliefs. Aidan Dodson has written extensively on 20th dynasty iconography. He has acknowledged that certain figures in the deeper corridors represent entity types not paralleled elsewhere in the royal temple corpus. The panel uses formal Old Kingdom hieroglyphic register style, which is unusual for a 20th dynasty structure. Old Kingdom style in a New Kingdom temple is like finding a medieval manuscript written in ancient Latin inside a modern government office. It signals that this content was not composed by the priests of Ramesses. It was copied, preserved from something older. The figures on the panel stand between 8 and 10 inches tall. They face left. The entity figures are depicted without the standard enemy posture used in Egyptian military art. They are not kneeling, they are not restrained. They are standing upright, and they are larger than the Egyptian soldiers depicted beside them. This is not fringe theory. This is not someone projecting meaning onto ambiguous symbols. The hieroglyphs on panel MHC44 follow standard grammatical rules. The symbol categories are consistent with administrative and historical registers, not religious hymns or funerary poetry. When trained scholars apply those rules without pre-deciding the outcome, the translation does not produce mythology, it reads like a threat assessment. The same matter-of-fact tone you would use to brief a military commander before an engagement. The problem is not the language. The language is clear. The problem is what it describes. And that is why the partial translations that exist were published in specialist journals with limited circulation, never in public-facing Egyptology, and never in full. The inscription has been photographed, it has been cataloged, it has not been translated completely in any publicly available document. That is not an accident of resources, that is a choice. The inscription begins with a designation, not a name in the conventional sense, a category marker. The hieroglyphs use a combined symbol. It pairs the glyph for being or person with a specific marker. That marker appears elsewhere in Egyptian writing in only 3 contexts. Descriptions of physical dimensions greater than human scale, references to beings that existed before the first pharaohs, records of entities that survived encounters that killed ordinary soldiers. That last use is the specific one here. The marker is attached to the same root as the Egyptian word for persistent, or that which continues. That root appears in texts describing the Nile flood, It appears in texts describing disease that returns after treatment. It appears in engineering records describing a load that cannot be removed. The inscription is not calling these beings gods. It is classifying them as a type that does not stop. What follows on the second register is more specific. The text describes the origin point. The hieroglyphs use the phrase translated most directly as those who rose from the deep south before the count of kings began. The phrase "before the count of kings began" is precise Egyptian historical language. It appears in the same grammatical form in the Turin king list to separate pre-dynastic rulers from historical ones. This is not poetic language for the distant past. It is a chronological marker. The inscription is placing these beings in the period before Egypt's official history starts. And the Deep South is not metaphor either. The Egyptian geographical term used here refers to the region beyond the fourth cataract of the Nile. In Ramesseid-era texts, this designation points to what is now Sudan and northern Ethiopia. Not the underworld, not the sky, a specific place on land, accessible by river. And then on the lower panel, the inscription shifts to what clearly reads as tactical information. Here is where it gets disturbing. The text describes 3 methods the Egyptian military used against these beings in documented encounters. All 3 failed. The first was conventional bronze weapons. The inscription states plainly that the edges did not hold against them. Not that the weapons were ineffective strategically. That the physical metal failed. It uses the same verb form found in engineering texts to describe material failure under stress. Bronze couldn't do this. The inscription knows that, it says so. 3 separate campaign records. 3 separate failures. The scribes did not record this with confusion, they recorded it the way a quartermaster records a defective supply batch. Factual, annotated, filed. The second method involved fire, described using the glyph for controlled military flame, the kind used in siege warfare. The text records that fire slowed them, not stopped, slowed. The third method is the one that nobody quotes from this panel. It describes a compound used by the priests of Ptah. The inscription does not name the materials directly. It references them through the symbol for the deep earth and the symbol for the thing that does not occur naturally on the surface. The priests believe this compound worked. The inscription records 1 successful containment, 1, in what reads like multiple documented encounters across several reigns. The final line of the lower panel is the location marker. The inscription states that the place where the last containment occurred is sealed beneath a structure that stands where the 2 waters divide below the place of the setting sun. In Egyptian geographical language, the 2 waters divide refers to a river fork. The place of the setting sun in relation to a Nile fork below a major temple complex points to a site on the west bank. The ground directly beneath Medinet Habu itself sits above a fork in an ancient tributary channel that is now dry. That is not coincidence. The inscription is pointing down. Here is where the modern record intersects. In 2020, a ground-penetrating radar survey was conducted at the Medinet Habu complex by a joint team from Cairo University and the German Archaeological Institute, led by Dr. Mohammed Ismail Khaled. The survey was intended to map subsurface architectural remains from the New Kingdom period. What it found, at a depth of approximately 12 meters directly beneath the innermost corridor, was an anomaly. A rectangular sealed chamber, oriented north to south, approximately 8 meters by 14 meters, with walls dense enough to register as cut stone rather than natural substrate, not a natural void, not a geological formation. A constructed room, sealed, with no recorded entrance shaft in any published architectural survey of the temple. The survey report was published internally. It has not been released publicly. The chamber is not listed in the Oriental Institute's architectural database for Medinet Habu. It does not appear in any public-facing documentation of the site. It exists in one internal report. That report has not been shared. Dr. Khaled presented preliminary findings at the 2021 Cairo Egyptology Symposium. The session was not recorded. No transcript was published. Then in 2017, the Scan Pyramids project announced something relevant. The team had already used muon radiography to detect the big void above the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid. They stated that the same technology was being evaluated for secondary temple sites. Medinet Habu was named among them. Mehdi Tayyubi, the lead researcher at the HIP Institute, confirmed in an interview that the Western Bank complex had been flagged for survey. No survey at Medinet Habu using this technology has been publicly announced. The equipment that found a hidden chamber inside the most studied pyramid on Earth has not been pointed at the site the inscription identifies. That is a decision, not an oversight. Now here is where the suppression becomes specific. Around 1336 BCE, following the death of Akhenaten, the priesthood of Amun systematically destroyed inscriptions across Egypt that referenced entities not sanctioned by the religious framework of Amun. Akhenaten's court records had included references to non-standard beings encountered in the southern territories, specifically campaign records from his military commanders in the Upper Nile region. Those records were erased along with his name. The purge was not about religion alone. It targeted specific categories of historical content: encounter records, southern campaign dispatches, anything that described what the military had faced beyond the Fourth Cataract. Pre-dynastic encounter records were among them. Second suppression. In 391 CE, the Christian bishop Theophilus of Alexandria ordered the destruction of the Serapeum Library. The library held copies of temple records predating the Ptolemaic period, including administrative documents from the New Kingdom military archives. Texts describing encounters with non-standard enemies during southern campaigns were categorized as pagan and destroyed. This was not collateral damage. The records targeted were the ones that described beings outside the accepted human framework. Third suppression. Napoleon's 1798 expedition documented Medinet Habu extensively. The description de l'Egypte includes detailed plates of the outer battle reliefs. The inner corridor panels, including MHC 44, do not appear in the published volumes. The expedition scholar Vivant Denon kept a private journal. It was published in a limited Paris edition in 1802. He recorded that the innermost sections contained carvings that did not match the battle narrative of the outer walls. The team chose not to reproduce them for the published record. That choice was made. Someone made it. That choice was made. Someone made it. Fourth suppression. Between 2002 and 2011, Zahi Hawass, as Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, controlled all excavation and independent research permits across major Egyptian sites. Researchers who applied to study the inner corridor sections of Medinet Habu independently were required to submit proposed interpretations in advance. Any application that referenced pre-dynastic encounter records or non-standard entity classification in its stated research questions was denied. John Anthony West applied in 2003 to conduct a formal survey of the inner corridors. Denied. He reapplied in 2006, denied again. No reason was given either time. West spent the final years of his career working from photographs and published survey plates. He was never permitted inside the inner corridor. His question was specific. Did the entity classifications in the inner register panels represent a distinct historical category of encounter, separate from standard enemy typologies in Ramessid military art? That is a falsifiable scholarly question. It requires physical access to answer. The access was never granted. West died in 2018. The corridor remains restricted. Now let me be clear. I am not saying these beings were extraterrestrial. I am not saying the ancient Egyptians had weapons technology beyond what archaeology has confirmed. The inscription at Medinet Habu is not a science fiction text, but what it describes, when read using those same grammatical rules, is a documented encounter with a category of being the Egyptians did not invent mythologically. They filed a report on it. They created a threat assessment for it. They recorded failed countermeasures. They recorded one successful containment, and they marked a location. The priests of Ptah were not poets. They were the engineers and metallurgists of the ancient world. When they wrote that something required a compound from the deep earth to contain, they were writing the way a chemist writes a formulation note. That is not mythology. That is a record of a problem and an attempted solution. What we have to confront is what this means for the official picture. Egyptian records from 3 separate dynasties reference beings from the southern territories that predate the first pharaoh and that the military could not neutralize through standard means. The Turin king list includes pre-dynastic rulers described as those who came before, with reign lengths measured in centuries. The Palermo stone records events from the same period using the same administrative language it uses for verified historical events. Neither document is treated as fiction by Egyptologists who study them. They are treated as difficult, as chronologically inconvenient, as not yet explained. Those are different things from mythological. And the inscription at Medinet Habu is not the only place this category appears. Fragments of the coffin texts, specifically CT spell 473, reference beings from before the count of reigns who could not be turned by the weapons of men. The scribes of the Middle Kingdom were copying something older. They were not inventing. And beneath that corridor, 12 meters down, there is a sealed chamber. No team has been authorized to open it. The ground-penetrating radar found it in 2020. The muon technology that could map its interior exists and has been used on other sites. The permit has not been issued. The inscription above it says the last containment is sealed beneath this place. The chamber is there. The technology to examine it is there. The permit is not. No timeline. No explanation. The ground-penetrating radar report sits in an internal file. The muon survey was never scheduled, and the beings the inscription describes, whether biological, geological, historical, or something else entirely, remain exactly where the priests of Ptah left them.